guys. I just wanted to do a kind of like a almost 5 year, I think about 5 years since I've owned this BMW M3, the e92, and kind of like the true cost of ownership. To give you an idea, this is a 2013 e92 competition. I bought it for, I'd say, around $41,000, and it had CPO. It was from a BMW dealership, so I was buying it pretty new at the time. It was only 2 years old, I believe. And so the way it works with BMW CPO and oil changes, I bought the extended plan. It was, I think, every 14,000 miles they did an oil change, and I definitely did not follow that. What I did was I started doing my own oil changes in between, and the average oil change typically for this car can range anywhere from $180 to, I'd say, $250, depending on where you take it. And I've experimented with different oil. I feel like liquid moly kind of burned faster than the Castrol, so I typically stick with the Castrol or the BMW M-Power oil. Aside from that, they actually had covered my spark plugs, the engine air filter, cabin air filter, differential flush, and brake flush. And that was kind of one of the bigger ticket services. I'd say it was around, if BMW and the sheets showed around $1,200 to $1,400. So that almost paid, I'd say, paid me back half of what I had paid for the extended service warranty. Other than that, the other biggest ticket item was the rear tires. I experimented with Pirellis, and I only got maybe 15 to 20,000 miles, and I think it was the best feeling tire, but it had such low tread. So I felt as though I should have just stayed with Continental, and that's what I got with for this car in the rear, to just match the front. And each tire was like $400, and I kind of went with a wider setup. These are the competition wheels. So I believe I have 285 in the rear, and it's pretty flush. There isn't any sort of rubbing, unless I have two heavy guys in the back. Other than that, the car really has never broken down on me. But there was one occurrence where I did do the oil change myself, and I think one of the biggest faults about servicing, living with the car, is there's no dipstick. So you put in oil, you change your oil, and you have to drive it, and the car won't automatically measure the oil until it's working temp, and working temp for a little bit as well. So I was already on the freeway, and it said drain oil. It's hot, and it's full, and it said drain about like a quart of oil. So I drained it, and then I checked it again. I sat for a while on the side of the road, drained hot oil, and it still said to drain. At that point, I just kind of gave up and had the car towed home. So for the next time that I did the oil change, I really made sure that it was perfect, even though I added the specified amount. That was one of the most headache things I think I had to endure with the car. Another time was I was on my way to Vegas, and I had known that I was going to get an oil change soon. My oil gauge said that I had 75% left, and it's, if you're familiar with the way it looks, there's a gauge and there's a halfway mark. It was above the halfway mark, in between that and full, so I said, okay, well, I should be able to make it to Vegas and back and do my oil change. But halfway through to the trip, it notified me add oil immediately, low oil, and I kind of freaked out because it was hot weather. I was halfway to Vegas, and what are you gonna do? So I called all these shops, and they said, oh, don't worry about it, just don't gun it. And I made it to Vegas, and the next day, I believe, was going to be like Memorial Day, so everyone was closed, and the kind of oil this uses, there isn't any oil at AutoZone, O'Reilly's, or any of those common stores. You have to buy it either online from a specialty shop or BMW. And thankfully enough, shout out to BMW of Las Vegas. They gave me a quart for free, and I filled it up. And even though it said add a full quart, I only added a quarter of a quart. And by the time I had done that, I turned on the car and I drove for a little bit around the strip. It's made basically the max. And on the way home, it went down back a quarter. So you can kind of see how this is really annoying. I think one of the stupidest things that BMW does is these electronic oil gauges. But the true cost of ownership really for this M car has been 0 to none, aside from typical oil changes, and like I said, $180 to $250. The tires really is based off of your own preference and how you drive. I changed my tires after a few years, and I don't necessarily put a lot of mileage on the car. I bought this car 5 years ago at, I think it was just at 20 to 30,000 miles, and it only has 70 now. There's a few big ticket items that I plan on doing. Since this is a 2013, it has the updated rod bearings. I don't race the car. I'm pretty meticulous about how I drive it and warm it up. So I'm not necessarily worried about the rod bearings, but I do plan on doing them when I hit 80,000 miles. Anytime sooner than that, I think it's really unnecessary. Unless you're supercharged, you're racing the car, you know yourself, if you're abusing the car, you should just do it. Another thing that I noticed, the idle isn't perfect, and it's likely because I've already done my spark plugs. I think it's the idle control valve, and that's one of those ticket items that you should basically do around this time period, because those plastic parts tend to start failing. So this upcoming, I think when I actually do hit 80,000 miles, I'll do everything together, and I'm expecting to pay maybe $5,000 for rod bearings, the idle control valve, and possibly just more flushes. But with that being said, I only put maybe 2,000 miles every year on the car. I try and drive it at least once a week, once every other week, and to go grab coffee or take it out of town. So that's kind of like just the real overview of what ownership has been like for this M3. I've owned 5 BMWs, and I can tell you that ownership is dramatically different when you buy a car that's newer and you keep it, rather than buying it used with a lot of mileage or multiple owners, because you really don't know what you're going to be getting. But if you do take care of your car and you stay regular with your maintenance, it should be like any other car. That being said, it is a race engine, and you're going to be paying a little bit more for labor when stuff does go wrong, but nothing has necessarily gone wrong. I feel like this V8 is one of the best engines that BMW has made, aside from the whole rod bearing issue. And it's really hard to gauge, because when you go online and you see people complain about rod bearings, it's the people who have had those issues, so it makes it sound really scary, and you don't necessarily know the true percentage of people who have experienced that. But yeah, that's my true ownership of this BMW. I spent $40,000 on it. 5 years later, I can still almost sell it for damn near 30,000. And the good thing about M cars, and specifically ones that people like, they maintain their value. I I bought an X5M and I'm selling it now because I feel as though I'm not going to be receiving the same sort of money later on down the line, because people don't like X5Ms as much as they like M3s. So I felt like these are more, not necessarily something you invest in, but something you can definitely see a return on to little to no cost of ownership. Plus, how much you enjoy it really does gauge how much you'll get back in worth. So that's just a quick video update slash ownership costs of the BMW. Keep your oil changed, $250 at most every 5, 6, 7,000 miles. And other than that, tires are a big ticket item. Consider rod bearings, but if it's already been done, you don't got to worry about it. The idle control valve is one of those things that goes off like around 80,000 miles, but even then I'm not 100% sure it's my idle control valve. Another thing that's kind of funky with the car is a fuel filler valve, I believe, an air breather valve. And it's when you pump gas and you fill it up to the top, and it's not up to spec for the engine's liking. A lot of the time you'll have a rough idle for the first 5 minutes of driving, and it's one of those things that you can get used to or just get rid of, and you just change out. So I'll likely do that too. It happens once in a blue moon, especially in really hot weather. The fuel breather valve kind of goes off, and the car idles kind of like crap for 5 minutes, but drives fine otherwise. That's it. Nothing else is wrong with the car at all, mechanically, electrically, and this is a 2013. So we're in 2020 right now, so it just kind of shows you that these M cars are really designed to last, and if you take good care of them, they should treat you well. And that's it.